Here's HAT Report number 2 for David Townsend. The readings this week kind of gave me the same impression that the readings last week did. I just really wish that I had an opportunity to experience more of the context for these. The Reamer, I'm more familiar with, having read the 1990s version of his work at least, but it's been a while. I probably should spend some time rereading that all. A couple of the good quotes from there for me, talking about materiality is the ability of musical sound to give a physical presence to meaning, and a couple of the specific quotes: at the core of music is the power of sounds to incorporate meaning, to give meanings corporeal actuality for humans to experience. I like that, corporeal actuality. Musical form, sounds organized to be musically meaningful within a cultural context is the basis for the characteristic experience music provides, giving body to incarnating feeling through sounds intended to do precisely that. So both of these ideas just having to do with helping us to kind of sort out what's in us through musical sound, to put the human experience in a more concrete form, shall we say. Reminds me a lot of Langer's ideas of music expressing forms of feeling, or I think she uses even the communicating word some of the time there, and just the idea of kind of helping us sort out ourselves, those around us, even the world around us, in a unique way that maybe just thoughts in terms of words or pictures do not. One of the interesting things about getting to know my wife over the years has been, and this was something we kind of came upon together through years of discussion that were at first more frustrating until we kind of understood what was going on. But I, as many, see or think in words and pictures primarily. She doesn't. She thinks in sensations, and she has to translate them into words, and has a difficult time translating them into words. So once we realize that, words are easier for me. Analyzing things, keeping facts in my conscious mind, those are all easier, more natural processes for me. So when we would have discussions about meaningful things, we learned that we would have to just kind of talk through something for a while, and I would have to help her kind of label and organize this swirling world of sensation within her in a way that we could then discuss. And over time, we've gotten better at doing that. Sometimes forget to still, and we kind of go around and around in circles. But music then sort of has that same capacity to put a body or form to what's going on inside us that maybe even those that are used to thinking in words can't. Words are limited in some way. They take one small part of experience and focus on that and define it. But experience is more of a holistic process a lot of times, and musical sound can represent that in a way that I think is closer to what it feels like to experience those things. At least that's the concept that they're talking about when they're talking about forms of feeling, as I understand it anyway. The idea in our especially modern Western culture of experiencing I guess sensation through sound is one that we've been taught from the time that we're born pretty much, and is one that through film score we actually have a very specific connection of certain sounds to certain sensations. Through vocal music, which is mostly what we hear in our society, the same exact thing. Specific words put to specific sounds of music. So we're almost taught or it's almost codified for us in a way that I guess that's part of what makes a culture. People experience sounds in similar fashions in that way. Yet at the same time, we still have our own personal take on everything. So I just thought that idea of giving materiality to meaning was kind of something that not only has existed through history, but we are taught in a kind of sequential way in our modern Western concept of music and meaning. When I was looking through the Schwanden Aesthetics and Music Education article, a couple things stood out to me. First of all, the goal of raising the general level of aesthetic understanding toward more significant musical experiences requires a commitment to values which transcend more pleasurable likes and dislikes. This really resonated with me. This is one of the key ideas I tried to share with my students, especially as they got a little bit older. Try to postpone as they experience new music through listening or making the music. Try to postpone the initial I like it or I don't like it, which for a lot of people is as far as they get. They like it, they accept it. They don't like it, they reject it, and they go on. I think music education, one of my purposes in music education was to help them have a basis for making informed decisions about music, for determining the quality or the excellence and the artist of the artistry in the music, and for giving them a basis from which to experience a lot broader and deeper kind of meaning with music. For me, a lot of this happened through teaching and leading them through different levels of audiation to begin to experience a lot of the levels of musical thought, especially, but even sensational experience. You have to be able to kind of have a mental framework of what's going on in the music, whether you're talking about the context of tonality and meter in Western music, of harmonic progression, of expected patterns of sound, tonal and rhythm patterns, harmonic patterns, even timbres and combinations of timbres or ways of using expressive elements, until they have kind of a sequential understanding of that, where they can keep music in their mind and compare and contrast it. They're not really even able to make those kinds of comparisons and analyses of music that we hope they eventually get to. So that was kind of a starting point for me from kindergarten on, helping bring my students to and through levels of audiation. Then also at the same time helping them connect to the feeling side of it through creative movement as the young students, or even connecting to words and pictures and things like that as they got a little bit older, and then eventually being able to then use music as an expressive tool themselves as they became independent artists. So I guess that moving beyond the do I like it to the is it excellent, or to put another way of thinking about it, is it appropriate for this time, place, this people, and then as far as the moral aspect, is it right for this place, this time, this group of people, and starting to be able to think deeper about things like that was very important to me. And that was, I think, the sixth point, the sixth foundation he called it. In the 10th one, the aesthetic event is a connotative complex of associations made concrete by the individual. Under that point, one of the things he mentioned, musical understanding results from learning and may be approached fundamentally by grasping combinations of sounds and the successive patterns by which those sounds become interrelated. This is really, I guess, what I was just describing as the audiation development side of things. So it was interesting to see those ideas kind of pop up in an article from this period, in thoughts from this period. And I guess that was one of the main things I came away with from these readings. A lot of what I was taught in the 90s, early 2000s, I'm seeing in these readings, going back into the 60s and 70s, which is kind of cool to see some of the discussions as they formed and formulated during that time too. The article probably that I personally thought was the most interesting and was the most new to me was the Niter I'm not sure how you pronounce that name. The nature of aesthetic education article, not in that it had a lot of new ideas, but just the way he categorized conversation of aesthetics and music. I really liked his 5 characteristics of the aesthetic experience. It involves focus, perception, effect or affect, cognition, and cultural matrix. Uh, I couldn't help as I read the descriptions of each of those words, just kind of connecting them to some of the ideas and writers and individuals that have influenced me in my musical development. Um, Aesthetic experience involves focus and cultural matrix. Uh, Both really reminded me of things that David Elliott talked about, and you could say focus as in listening with intent and some of those things, but not a vicarious experience and invested psychological energy, I guess, were 2 things he said under focus that kind of reminded me of Elliott, of experiencing it fully, the idea of eventually experiencing flow as being a deep, all-encompassing focus and fluency in the medium. And then the cultural matrix, with a lot of the meaning in music being culturally derived and experienced through getting into the not only processes of making music, but the world which created that music, and understanding those people and those cultures and those meanings better because of that. So uh, I guess that's not unique to Elliott, but it definitely reminded me of some of his points in Music Matters. The aesthetic experience involves perception and cognition. Here we get into more of the formalist view, and also a lot of what I heard from Dr. Gordon during my classes with him and in conversations with him. Perception, again, the audiation development side of things. If you can't even take it in and keep it and organize it and classify it in your mind, it's hard to do comparisons and contrasting type of thoughts. Um, it's hard to predict what's coming up next, and therefore experience the sensation that comes from either the meeting of your prediction or not meeting your prediction, your expectation. I think it was Leonard Meyer that talked about some of those things. I may be wrong on that one, but um, the um, the cognition side of it, the analysis, synthesis, abstraction, generalization, evaluation. A lot of those are could be turned right into some of the skill learning sequence levels from Gordon's taxonomy of musical skill development, which also came out of general psychology, and he was just applying to music. So a lot of those 2 terms really connected with some of, like I said, what I learned from Dr. Gordon. And then the idea of the aesthetic experience involves affect or effect. I'm not sure how you pronounce that in this context, but the again, coming from Langer, some of Meyer, and definitely a lot of what Dr. Reamer also brought up in his writings there. And one of the interesting ideas being including both psychological change and feelingful reaction. So not just the feelingful sensation, emotion side, but psychological change, how it affects us physically. And again, getting back to that idea we started with of materiality in that way. One other thing that was really interesting to me in the Nieder article, Nieder, is if you look at under the cultivating aesthetic sensitivity section, he's talking about expression accounts for the 3 modes of behavior that are foundational to music. And he mentioned creation, performance, and response. These are 3 of the 4 artistic processes that we have in the 2014 music standards that NAFME put out. All we're missing here, we have creation, performance, response. We're just missing connection, and you have your 4 artistic experiences. So again, not only some concepts, but some actual words from where we are today, going directly back to these thoughts and these writings of 50 years ago now, and uh, just interesting for me to see the kind of the historical sequence of some of these ideas that have been now part of our life and profession in a very tangible way in recent years, and we're continuing to think through and make as we think of going beyond our vision for 2020, make adjustments to and make applications to our teaching. So um, again, not necessarily a lot of new concepts here, but I think really helpful ways of organizing and thinking about things that as I go forward in my own thinking and in my own teaching at the collegiate level will help give me vocabulary and give me organizational frameworks for some of these discussions. So appreciated them and look forward to what we have next.